Yo, what's up, gamer?
Hello, what's up? It's been a long time getting this lesson set up.
It's been yeah, I've done a lot of chess over the past couple months.
Have you?
But
Have you
but
though?
a lot.
The opening is fairly straightforward at least. There's three rules I want you to remember. And the first rule is controlling the center, which you have done with d4, and then I want you to develop your pieces, which you are currently doing with knight to c3.
But I can also put my knight here in
Ooh.
case.
Okay, I mean, I actually don't mind this move. Usually you don't want to put your knights on the side of the board, on like the corner, on the like borders of the board, because it has a lot less squares to go from there. But in this case,
Yeah.
I don't hate it, honestly. I actually don't hate it.
I see what you're saying because there's only three places I can move my knight now, rather
Right,
than like six.
exactly.
I would love to take your bishop here, but I can't obviously because you have your pawn there.
I mean, you can
Um,
still take it. Okay, so that's probably one of the first things that there is nothing wrong really with exchanging the same piece for the same piece. Like there's nothing wrong really with changing exchanging a bishop for a bishop, especially
yeah.
when you're newer to the game. Like I don't really know how the chess format of it's going to work. Okay, in that case, then you can totally play bishop takes d6. You can totally play like your move your light square bishop out. You can
I'm
do
curious why bishop d6 here, because because you can just get me with your pawn there, and then oh wait, it is a trade. Okay.
trades are fine, honestly. Like if you're overthinking a trade, probably just trade it. Like you can just take it. And I would probably actually rather take with the queen because I don't want to take with my c pawn because then I would have gotten double pawns.
Oh right, you don't want to like stack your pawns, and then it
Right.
also your queen too.
Yeah.
I can move my knight out a little bit. It'd be threatened by the queen, but I can just get it with the pawn, and that's fine. Actually, I think I might do that.
Yeah.
Um, it's not like a huge move, and I'd like to take my pawns out more because it feels kind of boxy, but
Moving your
um,
knight towards the center of the board is always usually a good thing. I just want you to remember, like, write down these rules or whatever it is, however you want to use to remember it. The first rule should always be to, like, um, control the center, and the second rule of chess is to always develop your pieces, and then the third rule is to always castle as fast as you can. And then there's another set of three rules that I want you to remember, which are look for checks, and then captures, and then threats. And that way you will never lose a piece.
and then threats. Okay.
Yeah, checks, captures, and threats. So if you always look for checks, captures, and threats before you make a move, right? Like before you make the move, because otherwise it's pointless. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
whenever your opponent makes a move, you should be thinking of checks, captures, threats. What is my opponent? Is my opponent checking me? First of all, is my opponent
Uh,
threatening to capture something? What's my
yeah.
opponent threatening? So I'm gonna teach you a little lesson here once again. You played f4, and then you probably didn't think about what I could play on the next move.
I was thinking you'd go like e5 to f4, but
Right.
uh,
Okay. So, what checks, captures, and threats do I have here?
you can put down your rook to c1. You also, oh, it's your queen.
Mm-hmm.
Queen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I am going to play queen takes e3 because I let you get away with your knight earlier. So I'll take this pawn.
Yeah.
But
So I can either move to h, or I move my rook up one.
either
Um,
of those are probably totally fine. Once again, the lesson here is simply just whenever you're making a move, think about, you know, honestly, I think telling you to think about checks, captures, and threats might be way too much because that's like a lot of things. Just look for checks and captures for now. Just think about, like, does my opponent have any checks after I make a move? Because checks are obviously, they can be checkmate. You just don't want to get checkmated.
yeah.
Right? And then
I
think
just
about captures because you don't want to lose your pieces.
okay. Okay, that
Yes.
makes sense.
So keep it simple. Like I just really want to keep the thought process simple, but I do want to streamline it a lot because 10 minutes is not a lot of time to play a chess game. And
Yeah.
I want to give your chances better than a 50-50. I just want you to think about the three opening things we just learned. which is controlling the center, developing your pieces, and then getting castle as fast as possible. And then the second set of 3 things, which I know already is a lot. This is like usually divided into 2 lessons, but hey, we're speedrunning you through to being able to like play. So, and then the second set of things really is to just look for checks and captures. That's it. Don't worry about the threats. Checks, captures. Okay. On every single move that you make sure your opponent doesn't have any checks or it captures where you lose pieces. Like, once again, swapping off a bishop is fine. Don't worry about that. Swapping off knights are fine. Like, bishop for knight is totally fine. Just don't swap off your queen for a knight or lose your knight or something like that. That's what I want you to focus on. Knights are worth 3.
Okay.
Bishops are worth 3. Rooks are worth 5-ish. Queens are worth 9-ish.
Okay, yikes. Okay.
Usually 2 rooks is slightly better than a queen, but I would not advise on that either. And then pawns are worth 1 point. So pawns are just... Yeah, and then obviously, please don't lose your king. You know, get a completely... Oh, I don't know about that move, though.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think so.
Because it'd be pawns, right?
Because, okay, so if I move my pawn... So, okay, simplify thoughts. If I capture a piece, what do you usually want to do?
Oh my god, I'm an idiot. Oh my god. Okay, what do you think about this?
I like that move a lot, actually. That's a really good move, and it's super thematic for positions like this. It's also like a 2,300 level move. It's a really good move because it forces my pawn to move up, and now it is no longer defended by the pawn on c6. So technically, it's weaker.
I feel like my pieces are somewhat developed, but I haven't castled.
I will disagree with that.
Mm-hmm. All right, why is that?
Because you still have a knight on g1. And your rooks are still on h1 and a1. And your queen is still on d1. So out of the, let's say, you have... Okay, so you basically have 7 pieces. We don't need to worry about the queen. Let's talk about the 6 pieces, like the bishops and the knights and the rooks. Until you have moved all of your minor pieces at least once... Minor pieces are knights and bishops. So until you have moved at least your knights and bishops at least once and gotten castled, you're not really developed.
Rather than move pawn to c3, I should probably move out my knight to probably f3.
Correct.
Because I couldn't do the corner like you said.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. That's perfect. Think of it this way. In chess, if you don't bring your pieces out, you're basically playing with like a half of an army, right? Like if you don't move your knight or your bishop, you're not using all of your pieces, and it's so you're making life a lot more difficult for yourself. We're streamlining this, so you just want to bring everything out. It's going to flow a lot better. This is more for chat because obviously you are able to play games where you don't bring your pieces out, but it's a lot easier to play chess if you have your pieces out. One other thing that I want to tell you before we like dive a little deeper is notice how you castled kingside. So kingside is the area between the H file and the E file. The E file to H file. Okay, you see that area? So that's called the kingside. When you're playing the opening, you don't have to know immediately after like move 1 which side you want to castle to. Wait, are you aware that you can castle on both sides?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure of that. Because you castled on the king side, notice how you're missing a pawn in front of the G file, like in front of your king. Like you're just missing that pawn.
Castle on the queen side.
Well, I actually don't think so because I have a lot of pawns pushed on the queen side. What I was actually going to say is if you know you're going to castle on the king side, I would recommend not pushing up g3, for example, to capture with the g pawn. Or if you know you're going to castle on the king side, then take back with the e pawn. Does that kind of make sense? Like you're sort of thinking you're thinking really far in advance, but it's not that hard of a thought. You're just like, oh, if I'm going to castle king side, I am not going to weaken my king structure. I'm not going to weaken the pawns. I'm not going to move the pawns out of the way.
No, I get that a lot because why would I, try to put my king into more harm's way when you're pushing on like a B side around there?
Exactly. Completely correct.
That makes sense.
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
You get the thought. Right. But it's something you might not have noticed before.
Yeah. So then, like a couple turns ago, if I was like, okay, like I'm going to castle probably in the next couple turns.
Mm-hmm.
it's like I see that you're pushing there, or like if you're pushing, like I'll see where it's coming from, and then like sort of develop based on that.
100% correct. I really like what you said, actually. You're like, oh, she's pushing here, so you don't really want to castle queenside either, right? Like, if I've already pushed up my pawns, you don't want to be on that side because it's dangerous. So what you have done now is actually totally fine. But because you're missing a pawn on the G file, what's a logical move for you to actually make right now?
I'd say put my king to h1.
Perfect. That's it.
Yeah.
That's perfect. Yes. You usually always want pawns in front of your king because, once again, you don't want to lose your king. Don't accidentally... Yeah, you just don't want to lose that king. So that's exactly the move that I want you to make.
Let me ask before I make it. My rook on f1. What about like putting that to g1? It kind of opens up that file.
Yeah,
but I don't know if it
exactly.
like boxes in my king too much.
No, you're great. Rook to g1 is exactly the move I would want you to make. You're thinking... So I know we're kind of entering a middle game now, and you have mostly finished developing your minor pieces, sort of the way I instructed you to. So now, obviously, you just need to find ways to do something with your position. And I think your instincts are really good. You mentioned that you have a half-open file. So playing rook to g... So that's an open file if there's no pawns on the file.
Opens like one or two, right?
A half open is usually if there's one or two. Yeah, exactly. Usually just one. So playing rook to g1 means you're putting your rook on a half open file, and you're also gearing up for potentially to attack my g7 pawn, right?
Yeah.
You can use your own like disadvantages, and you can turn those disadvantages into an advantage for yourself, depending on, the problem. That
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so because you don't have a pawn in the G file, you can just go. Have you ever played like League before? Out of curiosity.
I have asked so many friends, "Hey, should I play League?" Like I was talking to Cutie because I was like, she plays it a lot, and I was like, I'd love to play with her on stream one time. And she's like, "Please, for the love of God, do not ever get into League. Like, please stop."
That's so funny. Okay, no, I was asking that because space is a really important part of chess. Having more, like, I don't know if you've ever played Go or any of these other strategy games before, or like even Valorant.
Does StarCraft count?
StarCraft actually counts a lot. Yeah, RTS games have a lot to do with this. Being able to push up is so important, right? Like you're able to maneuver everything in your own like area so much easier. Does that make sense? Right. So
that does make sense.
Yeah, so pawns are kind of like me pushing up my minions to you.
Okay.
And you don't really want those minions pushed all the way up because you're going to have so much less space to maneuver. So taking on c5 is extremely important actually in this position, so I don't get to push c4. You can kind of already see how I have a lot more space on the queen side. Like if you look at your knight, it's on a2, your rook's on a1, my knight's already on c5, I already have a pawn on b4, I already have a pawn on a5. Like I have all of this space on the queen side. Like if you just count all of the squares that I like technically have, and you don't want to be cramped in chess because once again it just makes gameplay a lot less intuitive.
Okay. Yeah, that makes... Yeah, I get that.
Right. So if your opponent's offering to swap a pawn and threatening to like push up their pawn, you probably want to just swap that pawn for the most part because it's just much... Like, it's just a lot easier to play after swapping off a pawn rather than like, oh, if I have a pawn on c4, all of a sudden your knight can't go anywhere. Okay, so I'm going to make a move, and then after my move, I will want you to think about checks, captures, just checks and captures, really. Okay. Because I just want you to get into this habit of thinking about your opponent's threats. Like, I just want you to think about, oh, what might my opponent play next move, sort of thing. So once your opponent makes a move, first of all, you should always be looking for your own checks and captures. Like, you should always see, oh, what can I capture from my opponent's position? What can I check? If there's nothing, like, particularly noticeable, then you just go on to look at what can my opponent check? What can my opponent capture? And it's just always this, like, back and forth, back and forth.
You move your pawn to d4. most likely.
I would actually just take your pawn if you pushed e4, because I have 1, 2, 3. I have 3 pieces hitting the e4 square technically, and the knight too, so 4, and you only have 1 piece defending it. So you don't want to push e4. You don't want to lose any material ever. We do not want to play queen f3. Your queen is the most important piece in chess. You do not want to put it in harm's way. So you usually, this is another, oh my god, chess has so many of these like little finicky things that if you just think about every single move, you don't have to do it. But it's just good habit to do it from the very start, so you never get in a position where you lose your queen. If you would play queen to f3, me playing pawn to d4 is basically the equivalent of a check because your queen's under attack. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, okay, I can treat it like a check, basically.
Right.
And you definitely don't want that to happen.
You also don't want that to happen, especially because it's pinned.
I see. I think I see what you mean. Because then I'd put my queen, and I'd take your bishop, but then you would just take it back with your queen itself.
Exactly, yeah.
How about rook g2?
Rook g2 is better than queen f3, but why don't you use a pawn to block?
Because that would just be smart and
yeah. I mean,
right, I have f2.
Right, there we go. Perfect.
Okay, so yeah, so if you have to like defend something or like put something in harm's way, you'd want to do it with the least valuable piece possible.
Yes, basically.
You go for it, take it.
Yeah.
Which sounds so obvious when you say it out loud.
Yes. Yes.
But okay, so I'd go there.
Okay. I'm gonna. Okay, actually, no, I'm not too worried about the move right now. So I'm just gonna play like a very normal developing move and sort of let you think once again. Okay, actually, look, one of the problems for like newer players is that they can establish that in their head, but that might not be true on the board. So
I get that.
For your sake, let's just say you have established there is no tactics in the position, which in this position is actually true. There's no more tactics in the position. Then you can focus on strategy. And strategy are the things like me telling you to control the center, which you have done a great job of. Develop your pieces, which you have done a mediocre job of. And you have castled, at least, so you've done a great job of that. So let's focus on the one thing you haven't really fully done yet. Notice how I have like moved all of my pieces at least once.
Yeah, you really have.
How many pieces of yours have you not moved yet?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5.
Okay, wait, not counting pawns, because we don't actually want to move the pawns that much.
Oh, then 2.
Right.
Or 3 if you count like the castle. Actually, no, because I moved to G. So
yeah.
2.
Yeah, okay, wait. I noticed how you said, like, 5. You don't really want to move pawns that often. You only want to move pawns if you're sort of, like, taking space to control the center or forced to. Because pawns can never move backwards, so where you position your pawns... Oh, please don't overthink this. Oh, my gosh. I just realized what I'm going to say.
I won't. I won't.
Okay, don't overthink it. But you tend to not want to move your pawns that much.
Okay.
Right. So if you ever are like, oh my god, I don't know what to play, I would actually recommend to not make a pawn move and just play one of your pieces that hasn't moved yet. So in this position, it's really hard to teach you strategies, like a plan, but if you haven't moved 2 of your pieces yet, what's kind of logical?
To move them?
Right. Exactly. Okay. There we go. Super simple. Yeah.
Yes, I've gotten it.
Yes.
Here, I mean, you have your rook that you can come down to C1, but then I can take it with my own rook, and that sets up a empty file. So I think I just take it.
Okay. You can take it with basically the pawn or the queen, and I would actually prefer to take with the queen for a very specific reason that I think is way too complicated to explain to you. I would just say take with the queen for now. The reason why I wanted you to take with the queen is if you took with the pawn, I would have been able to move my rook over to c2, which is the square where the pawn was on. And rooks, rooks on the second are the strongest places for rooks in chess.
Okay.
They just are point point blank, and you should do a lot to actually stop your opponent from being able to get there. Once again, that's like a logic that I think, like a thing that I think is just way too complicated at this current time. But in general, if you can stop your opponent from having open files, that's a good thing, right? Like, just logically.
Okay, that's just like a thing you should keep in mind.
Generally. Right. Okay. If you minimize your opponent's chances for an advantage, you are increasing your own chances to not blunder and lose the game at any given point.
Oh, okay. God, this is where like my brain in chess just like doesn't go as well.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't like, because now I'm like there's so many different options rather than the beginning of the game where it's like, okay, it's very clear what to do.
Very true.
Like, my first instinct is to move my pawn f4 to f5, but then that blocks my queen.
F4 to f5, but it blocks your queen. That's not the worst move for sure. But I think you probably... Okay, so whenever you're potentially stuck, right? Yeah. One of the first things you can do, you've already done this, is to try to find something to attack.
Yeah, okay.
Which you've done a good job of. And then after that, it can be, for example, to improve your piece positioning. What's one of your pieces that isn't doing a lot right now?
It's my knight on a2.
Right. And does black really have any threats currently?
No. Well, no, not on it at all.
Okay. So if black doesn't have any threats, then what's like a logical thing to do?
Well, I'd move it out somehow.
Mm-hmm.
But my knight to b4 gets taken by pawn. Knight to c3 gets taken by pawn. So I'd have to move my knight to c1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great move. I think if you have no idea what you're going to do, which is one of the hardest parts about chess, one of the hardest parts about chess really is when you have like no plans, nothing clear, your opponent has defended against everything, and then you're like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? One of the best things you can do is to just improve the positioning of your pieces. One of the worst things you can do is to just start pushing random pawns. That's like actually one of the worst things you can do.
Okay, that's what I feel like I normally do when I play chess. Is like, I don't know what to do next. So then I'll just be like over aggressive with pieces that have no right being aggressive.
Right. And that's definitely something you don't want to do. It's a lot better to just be careful and, you know, really just try to, like improve the positioning of your pieces is just so important. It's just so important. Like if your piece has stopped being useful on one square, just make it useful on a different square. If you have time for it, right? Of course. If you don't have time for it, then one of the other things that's actually really interesting about chess too, if you realize you don't have time to improve your pieces, then what's logical to do in that situation? Like if you know your opponent is threatening something, what should you do?
You should defend it.
Exactly, right? Like it's not that difficult. It's not a very difficult thought process. So if your opponent has a threat, you defend against it. If your opponent doesn't have a threat, then you improve your position somehow. You attack something. You move your piece somewhere better. Okay, I'm going to say to like label your thoughts into two categories. Let's always look, once you're out of the opening, I would say always look for tactics first. So always just go checks, captures, and then go into strategy. Don't try to like mix it all together because it gets a little hard. So be like, I'm still looking at tactics or I am only looking at strategy now. I don't want to make you overthink this. Moving your knight is great. If you go to g4, this tactic here is called a pin. But it's called a pin because I cannot move my knight away because my king is under attack.
So then I can take with my knight here.
Right. So I can't, because I cannot move my knight away, you're basically forcibly winning that knight. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
I'm going to show you another example of a pin, which is a lot less powerful. But for example, in this position, this is also a pin. Pins are whenever you have a piece attacking your opponent's piece, and then behind it is another piece of your opponent's.
And that one's less powerful because if they don't move their knight, then you'll probably just take with a pawn. or like sorry, like if you take the knight with white on with bishop, pawn will just take it, and so it's not as powerful. Plus, it's not for a check.
Correct.
It's for the queen.
Right.
Okay.
But I just want to show you this is what a pin is, and it's a very this is one of like the 3 most common tactics that you will ever see in chess, and it's just something that I want you to really like sort of remember. Like I know we're teaching you a lot today, but
we're speedrunning.
Yeah, we're speedrunning. Exactly. We're speedrunning chess, but on the basis of checks and captures, you can do all of this really cool stuff. And I just want you to be aware of that and maybe like see one of those in your games, which can actually like really finish out a game, right? Like if you win a piece like this, currently, most of the time you're probably winning pieces because your opponent has blundered completely outright, like didn't defend a piece. But I just want you to be aware that you can also set yourself up for success.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Yes. So that is what a pin is, and you're able to, for example, next move, take however you want on the knight, because I don't actually have a good way of defending it.
Because then it's like you put check, and then you also get the queen.
Right. So this is called a fork.
Okay.
Yeah, this is just a fork. So
it's
very logical, right? You're like just
double.
Yeah,
double
pin. It's a double. It's actually called a double attack. Anytime you're attacking 2 pieces, it's always called a double attack. But not all double attacks are forks. Checks and captures are really important. That's kind of my whole point with this. All of chess tactics starts with checks and captures, and that's what I want to emphasize.